Hey, folks, welcome to All Parts Are Welcome, my Substack and video podcast. Today I have Reverend Dr. Celeste Lebak with me. Welcome, Celeste. How are you today?
Hi, great. Thanks for having me.
Celeste and I met about, I think it was February at the IFS Collective Unconference, and I went to both of Celeste's workshops. One was on restorative justice in IFS Restorative Justice Circles, and then the other one was about IFS and spirituality. So those two things, and I've been a big follower of Dr. Celeste's work since then. And I just want to know a bit about your story to introduce our readers to your story. For people who are meeting you for the first time, who is Celeste? What experience most shaped the person and guide you've become today?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because I think a lot of people often say, Celeste, what do you do? Who are you? What do you do? And it's a very difficult question for me to answer because I feel like I've lived so many lives. I have been an educator. I was first a teacher before I was anything else. And from that, I have written a lot of curriculum. I've got the opportunity to write the several different institute curriculums, including the Tulsa Race Massacre curriculum and one connected to Clara Looper, which is an amazing Oklahoma African-American history figure here in my neck of the woods. But I'm also a Unitarian Universalist minister, ordained as Unitarian Universalist, and have been basically following therapeutic modalities ever since I've had access to them. So as a chaplain, I've had a lot of access to therapeutic modalities from Gestalt to bioenergetics to family systems theory, Bowen family systems theory, to psychedelic-assisted therapy, and then to IFS. And really, it's been a lot about trying to understand how to support people in their mystical experiences that help them feel more connected to the world, whether or not that happens to be psychedelic induced or not. I had a lot of support in my life, but it was not therapeutic. And so some of my work in my 20s was actually around being introduced to psychedelics. And I always knew, even in that moment, that there was an answer that didn't involve taking drugs. And I've been looking for that for a long time. And so when I took the psychedelic-assisted therapy training out of the California Institute of Integral Studies and was introduced to a couple who was using IFS as their modality to work with people who were using MDMA, it became this obsession of mine immediately. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. My systemic theology, it's a how for my systemic theology. It was a missing piece of the restorative justice model that I had created and had been using at the Restorative Justice Institute of Oklahoma. And it just snapped so many things into place for me that made sense. It was the internal work that was missing from a lot of my understandings of how I want to be in the world and what I want to teach in the world. So that's the short answer.
Wow. That sounds like an overarching arc for a biography, one of those a life story, one of those life story biographies. That sounds amazing. And there's so many things I want to tease out from there. So one about finding internal family systems. Quite often people, when they find IFS, it's like their come to IFS moment, kind of like their come
Yes.
to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
How did you find it was just not like another therapeutic modality? What happened for you to help connect all those dots like you were talking about?
Yeah, it gave words to a lot of my experience that I just didn't have before. For one thing, explaining self-energy, even though my experience of self-energy has even differed a little bit since I first explored it through understanding it in the lens of actually Brian Jodone was the person who I experienced IFS from the very first
Oh
time,
yeah,
other than
same here.
watching it be used.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say I'm certified as a coach. And so I took his coaching program that he offered on IFS, and it felt very spiritual to me from the very beginning. And I'm like, oh, wow. So as he's talking about self-energy, I'm hearing in my heart fruits of the spirit. And as he's talking about parts, it's like, no, it's restorative justice for me. So it's no bad parts, right? So there was a way in which everything clicked into place. And I have a lot of voices in my head. And I also know I'm not crazy. And so there's a space of, wow, okay, this is how I can relate to what's going on in my internal world in a way that other people can understand. And then once I got into level 1 and started doing the training, and then got into level 2 and started doing program assisting, the community is what really hooked me. So what's possible in community when we are all operating with this same kind of cosmology just changes so much. And it gives opportunity to be able to hold ourselves and other folks accountable in a really beautiful way.
Wow. Man, Like everything you say, I have more and more questions, but this is amazing. This is pretty sure the people watching this is going to wanting to hear more about those things. So I'm going to try to tease out a little bit more.
Sure.
So this intersection of spirituality and IFS, you've spent years in ministry, chaplaincy. You've done some, I've been able to attend one of your restorative justice circles.
Yeah.
How have these worlds informed one another rather than compete with each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I really see them all trying different modalities, trying to explain the human experience in a lot of ways, and trying to intersect with the unhealed parts of culture, of our culture. We're all born into this world, ironically, through a traumatic event in some ways.
Yeah, birth is,
Yeah,
I always
birth is
say it's a messy
traumatic event.
experience. In
It is
spite of,
messy.
there's no birth that's not messy.
No, and there's no birth that's not traumatic in
Mhm.
some way. You're either being squeezed through a small hole or you're being taken out of the ceiling in some way. The whole thing is very difficult. But understanding culture and how culture impacts us and whether or not those are values, the cultural values are the values that we want to actually embrace ourselves, requires a certain amount of differentiation. And that differentiation can be had through spirituality and religion. It can be had through psychology and therapy. It can be had through restorative justice, honestly, in the modality and the ways in which we teach it at the Restorative Justice Institute. There's ways that we can start to pay attention to what the culture is beaming at us and whether or not we want to, as an antenna, in our bodies as an antenna, whether or not we want to turn the dial and actually pay attention to something else. And so having that choice, big shift in people's life. My role at the Restorative Justice Institute was the chief unlearning officer. And I feel like I'm still doing a lot of that, even though that's not role anymore as much. But I feel like I'm doing a lot of that. It's about helping to support people make choices, to increase their choices, to increase their agency, and to pay attention to what their values and their impact that they'd like to make in the world might be.
All right. I got a question for more restorative justice stuff, but I want to just
Yeah.
tease a little bit more out of the spirituality and IFS.
Sure.
What have spiritual communities misunderstood about psychological healing? And what has psychology sometimes overlooked about spirituality based on your experience?
Gosh, there's so many things I want to say about that. That's such a big question. I don't really experience psychology and spirituality as competing necessarily. I think that both explanations for what it means to be human. And I think that psychology really asks us how we become who we are, what's happened to us. And spirituality is asking what we're becoming and how we belong to something larger than ourselves. And I think we really need both. And then restorative justice is what do we do when harm, conflict, and difference arise? So all three of those things to me are responding to with the cosmology of what it means to be human and what it means to have differentiated and diverse individuals in community together. And those individuals also having an understanding of their own life being different than one another. So that's the kind of short answer. I'm not sure if that quite gets to where you're headed. But
Oh, it's good actually because of those two worlds. I was going to say you have a foot in both worlds, but really you're a system in both worlds and you have parts.
yeah, I could say psychology does become reductionist in a way. Human beings aren't simply nervous systems walking around managing symptoms, right? So we are meaning-making, relational, spiritual creatures wrestling with our own mortality, our own suffering, our own beauty, and our own belonging. So, and you're going to hear me say this probably a lot throughout the interview, but I don't believe that all suffering is actually something that can be healed. I believe there are existential burdens, and that's kind of some of the space that I'm pushing on psychology with spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting thing and have been able to view a video you shared with me. I don't know if it's available yet, but the Sounds True series with Richard Swartz on IFS and spirituality.
Yeah.
There's a video, an extra video that has been added. Is it available now or is it?
It should be. So when you buy the IFS and spirituality course, there is an interview with my wife and I. So my wife founded a church here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there's an interview with the two of us talking about the IFS and Christianity, particularly Universalist, inclusive, LGBTQIA plus inclusive Christianity.
Yep.
And where those intersections meet. So I had the amazing opportunity and quite frightening opportunity to lead Dick Schwartz through an IFS informed meditation on
Leaving the
leaving
99
that.
for the one.
Yes,
No, it was
for the one.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's worth the price of admission for the whole course
Oh,
to
thank
experience
you.
that one. And it was actually really helpful for Richard Schwartz. It was really helpful for him.
I think it's expanding his understanding and his idea of his own religious trauma. Definitely, yeah. And I don't know that it was particular to him, that religious trauma. He declares himself an atheist, but I do think that he has particular ideas about what it means to be Christian that I think we pushed up against, for sure.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot from IFS therapists, coaches, practitioners, because I know a lot of people who work with people who have a faith background that has really had an impact, not necessarily usually a positive impact on their life. And usually, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I did my initial trauma coaching program, I was like, oh man, I'm going to specialize in religious trauma because like it's such a niche thing. Hardly anyone has it. And I've learned it's actually one of the bigger areas that people are working through. Sometimes you just don't realize that you're not the only one going through stuff.
Especially here, buckle of the Bible Belt, where I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So there are so many competing voices that are religious voices in the behavior business, trying to say what behaviors it takes in order to be right with God. And I just have a lot of opinions about that.
Totally get it. And the groups that I'm quite often helping facilitate or I'm a part of, I'm learning a lot of those folks even come from 12-step recovery groups or other places. And even those hints of penal substitutionary atonement are in those areas too. And, words like character defects and stuff. And a lot of people's parts just come up against this. Like, I wasn't born bad. What do you mean? Now, for me, this is a little extra thing I just thought about since we're talking. I don't have a big issue with this idea of being born with burdens, ancestral trauma or ancestral family of origin things that come through. Even the birth process it could be quite traumatic. I don't have a big issue with burdens, being born with burdens or inheriting burdens from the DNA piece of epigenetics.
Yeah.
But I don't think at the core, I don't think a little baby's bad. And at the core, human beings are bad. I think that's what Dick talks about with the self, right? The part that can't be destroyed. And it's actually the part that helps with the healing process and the leadership process, the self-leadership process.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I would say that I don't believe that babies are bad either. And at the same time, I understand what I believe was trying to be articulated, which is that we come into a broken world. We are not born into a vacuum. And I think that understanding that we also carry the burdens of our ancestors is real. And Jesus even speaks to the fact, who is my mother and who is my father, right? That we don't have to be stuck on the same vine in particular, right? We can actually make some choices about our healing and where we go from waking up. So it doesn't have to be a life sentence, is what I believe he was trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's going to resonate with some people, and other people might not like it, and they'll write in with comments. That's fine.
Sure.
We're open to other people's opinions about things.
Yes.
Now, you're blending the spirituality with IFS and then now the restorative justice through an IFS lens.
Yeah.
Your restorative justice groups are unlike anything many people probably have encountered, right? What inspired you to bring these two worlds together?
Yeah, like I said, because the restorative justice model that I created and then got formed and reformed and shaped by the team of people that I worked with at my organization was systemic in its nature initially. So it's trauma-informed, it's systemic, it's culturally competent, but it was missing this internal piece. And what became so clear to me, and that's actually something that I'm picking up now with the Inner Sanctuary Institute, which I can talk about some more as well. But to me, what is happening, the way we behave on the outside world is directly impacted by how we treat our system on the inside. And so we're not going to treat people on the outside with compassion who behave in ways that we don't like if we're not treating our parts on the inside with compassion, doing things that we maybe don't like. And so for me, it was just the systemic piece that was missing from my understanding of what it means to be restorative, which is to offer support and accountability, right? So how do we offer the right amount of support and accountability? These groups that I formed, I'm hoping are actually going to, once the guide is published, is going to be able to offer up people an opportunity to be able to lead these groups in their communities. So they are groups that are IFS-informed RJ listening circles. So what that means is that people come, they check in, they do a meditation going on the inside based on one of the themes. And the themes are all shaped around the C's and the P's and the B's of self-energy, all this expansive understanding of the qualities of self-energy that we've received as IFS has been out in the world. And after they've done that meditation, we have some themed reading and some questions, and they take turns sharing out loud. And it's this beautiful container that creates space. So it's not like a normal conversation. It actually create space for people to be able to go deep inside, to be able to share outside without being responded to specifically or directly, which is just unlike any other way of being listened to that we have in our culture right now. And those groups, I'm hoping, are like an hour and a half to 2 hour meetings. I'm hoping that they'll be available. I'm going to teach ministers how to do it. I'm teaching
Yeah.
therapists how to do it. I hope that people will be doing more of those in the world to make IFS accessible, but also to create community around self-energy and understanding exactly what it is.
Yeah. So that's when I met you. It was back to back these workshops. So I did the restorative justice. I've been a part of a couple of online communities around IFS. Path to Recovery is where I first found IFS peer support groups, 12-step groups. I listened to Tammy Sollenberger's The One Inside podcast.
I love
and they
it.
had
I've listened to all of them.
The founder, like, this is like 2022, I think I started going to these, maybe, 2022. And because we're all locked up, it was a pandemic.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Places so easily online. And then I was a part of a group that wanted to create sort of independent, sort of like reading IFS books and resources and then having a sharing circle. So we created a community. It's called ifspeers.com. It's a peer support community. It's not professional. We're all IFS enthusiasts in that space.
Yeah.
But we read books together and we share, because if we talk about a part of me this and a part of me that with some of the people that are around us, they're like, what is wrong with this person? What are they doing?
Right.
So it's a place where you can
Right.
be in your IFS parts and everyone understands, like the cheers where everyone knows your parts, say your name. But when I experienced restorative justice circles, I went to a couple that weren't led by you, which were still pretty good because there were people who were doing really amazing work in the community. This is the ones that are part of, I think that they call it the Oklahoma Restorative Justice Institute.
Yeah.
And then I went to yours and I was able to hang out with some of your folks. So I think, I don't know, was it a training one that I was going to, or was it just the one that you do?
It was just the one I do,
Okay.
that I lead.
Yeah, so they both were great. And then now I see that you have some training and stuff coming up, I think, on your website. So we want to get people going to your website, because I think IFS has the power to do a lot of things around the world. And if faith communities and, let's say, social groups, look, either social service organizations, anyone who wants to do peer support or do like this healing work, but in a way that you have some materials, like you said, some curriculum, you're creating a book. It's really, I'm going to say, it's not that difficult, really.
No,
But it takes some time. It takes a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
But for me, I always get these amazing accolades from people who are like, Brandon, thank you so much for putting this time in and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm just so happy you guys come, because I wouldn't be able to do this by myself. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's amazing. So let's talk about some of the training. And I also want to talk about community, because it's one of the things I noticed you're really into is this community stuff and some of this training. You already brought up the Inner Sanctuary Institute.
Yes.
So you're launching this.
Yes.
What's the dream behind it, and why does the world need it now?
Yeah. So the Inner Sanctuary Institute was really crafted. It's interesting because the name came to me at the same conference that you and I met at, which is what's so interesting.
Oh, wow.
So I already had the vision, but I didn't have a name, and the name came through that space, which is what's so cool. But I have this vision. So I'd been working ever since I was a program assistant at IFSI, I have seen the power of what demos can do to a community. So what a demonstration of IFS, one person being guided and allowing other people to watch that process actually can do. And so I started leading groups, workshops once a month at my wife's church, at House Church Tulsa, where I would introduce IFS and then I would connect it to a scripture, often a parable. And then we would do a guided meditation so people could go inside based on some of the themes that were coming up in the parable. And we'd take a break and we'd come back and people would put their names in a hat to do a demo. And I would teach people, both sitting on the outside of that demo, who are not the one who's actually being guided, to be able to be with their own system and also attend to what's going on in the group. And these were all members of my wife's church. And so what it created was just this beautiful healing space where one person in the center is getting support, but everyone is actually also benefiting from being able to be with their own systems at the same time. And they're learning how to share their self-energy, lend their self-energy to help support someone to get that healing. And at the end of it, then we have an integration circle where we talk about what was going on inside our systems, everybody on the outside of the circle, what was going on inside for them and what they took away about their own system before we leave. And that experience was so powerful that we started repeating it, like I said, monthly. And it has just drastically changed so many people's experience of church. When you begin to know your own system, you better understand your own consent.
Mm.
When you know what's going on inside of you and who's saying, no, I don't think this is a good idea, or yes, this is a great idea. When you know who's saying yes and who's saying no, it changes our own understanding of being integrated in our system when we say yes to service, when we say no to something. And I think it also opened us up to be more self-led in worship, which is just a completely different experience. Being self-led in worship helped me to understand the process, made me engage with the scripture differently, made me engage with hymns differently, worship music differently. So just in a way that kind of opened me up to what I believe is this cosmology that even Jesus is pointing to. So deepened my understanding of my own universalist Christian modality. So ever since we did that, I got really clear that a lot of people would really benefit from that. And I've been in conversation with Dick about training clergy and what that means at Richard Schwartz, about clergy and what it means for clergy to have access to this material. And IFSI has just gone a different direction. And I really want to have an opportunity for clergy and pastoral care teams to be able to be trained. So I also want to be able to consult with them about what it means to lead these kinds of workshops, the ministers of their own churches, to lead these workshops at their churches, to have access to be able to support people in that way, and to have the kind of care around them that they would need to be able to meet people's trailheads as they show up in those spaces, right? So training clergy first is a vision, then training pastoral care teams as well to some of those clergy who are catching the same vision that I'm catching, and then consulting with those churches and hosting support for those ministers who are doing that work across the country. It's really the biggest vision that I have right now, but we're starting small.
Right.
So the way that we started is that I got certified to be in a clinical pastoral education space, which has been amazing. So we just offered the first IFS informed clinical pastoral education unit through CPSP, and had 12 incredible ministers, clergy in training come, and clergy who are not in training, who actually have their own spaces, who wanted to do an additional unit of clinical pastoral education or do their first if they're in seminary. And they participated in 12 intensive weeks of getting that unit through this IFS-informed CPE unit. And that has really helped to shape my teaching, is how I learn in a lot of ways. And so it's forced me to get articulate about what's the role of IFS connected to spirituality and spiritual formation and pastoral care. And I'm really excited that we're going to be training our first cohort of clergy starting in the fall. So there are 36 slots for any ministers who are out there who are interested in being in this groundbreaking cohort of being trained in. IFS is the map, but the larger picture is about spiritual formation, spiritual care. So they're getting both the map and the formation in the same place. So it's an Inner Sanctuary Institute level 1. And
Right.
what's cool about it is that we've got IFS trainers, IFSI trainers who are going to do it alongside me. So Jory Agate and Margaret Conley, who are both IFSI trainers, and a team of program assistants who are all IFSI trained, are going to be helping this first cohort. If there's a clergy person out there who's like, gosh, I wish that I could get trained by IFSI, this is the place to come, because it's going to be in a community of clergy learning the map of IFS through this lens of spiritual formation.
Right. It seems like you're the model blender. You're not the IFS blending, but in the real, well, IFS is a model that works with a lot of other models, and you've proved it by the restorative justice work. You're now with the pastoral clinical education work, and now the inner sanctuary. So that's 3 things that you've launched now with IFS. Well, the third one's coming, but it's
the
on
third one's happening. It's all part of it, because the Inner Sanctuary Institute is doing both the clinical pastoral education and training people in the ISI model, which has IFS as the map. So it's really exciting to me. I do like to connect things together.
Yeah, and you have a little bit of experience with a bunch of different things.
I do. It's a second organization I'm birthing, and I'm really proud of it. Really proud of it. We're already a nonprofit. So I want to say this too. This is important for people who are listening who don't have clergy in their lives. If you think that churches need to be trained in IFS and you want to support this work, please consider donating, because I know that there are clergy out there who don't have a big budget. And I do think that the more self-led clergy we have in the world, the less religious trauma we will likely also have.
Oh, I know. Totally agree with that. It's so interesting, because starting to learn that people think I know what I'm talking about. I have done a lot of internal work, and IFS has been part of it. And I have a blog, and I do these groups. And I'm actually having people come to me saying, would you be interested in mentoring me? Would you be interested in doing this? I'm like, that was not a part of my plan. You know what I mean? And so sometimes the people I'm quote unquote coaching, I've coached a couple of doctors, medical doctors.
Yes.
I've coached lots of therapists. And I'm just saying everyone needs support, right? And so if you're a
Yes.
clergy person or you're a person that works in faith-based institutions, that's my sort of background at one time is I did a lot of work with faith-based institutions,
Yeah.
parachurch groups or whatever. It's not really to get the training from the institute. It's not really available to you unless you have some sort of mental health professional degree, right? Masters of counseling or psychology and all the sort of social worker, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So to get IFS trainers who have both those designations, I took a look at your
Yes.
trainers list. They are
Yes.
both in the spiritual world and in psychological world, and
Yes.
they are approved trainers from the institute. And is this the only time that I don't know about the future. The future always changes, but this is pretty much the first, maybe and only time you're going to get access to these types of
I
trainers.
think that it's probably going to be the first time that you're going to have this many in one spot. So I may continue to pull on some
Right.
lead
Yeah. You get
trainers
those
going
relationships.
forward
Yeah.
because I have those relationships, but they're all therapists, right? And I'm not a therapist. So I squeaked in at the edge of the rules changing.
Yeah.
And so I'm a practitioner. I'm a level 3 certified practitioner, but I hit a wall, which is one of the reasons why I was pushing back on Dick and saying, hey, what's happening? And they're just going a different direction in where they're focusing right now. But he's focusing on spirituality. And I
Yeah.
believe that Unitarian Universalism in general
Yeah.
is the perfect spot to receive IFS. Frankly, there's a lot of ways in which I believe IFS can be the how of a spiritual practice for Unitarian Universalists. And it also can help deepen Christian, Jewish, Muslim faith traditions, Buddhist faith traditions, Hindu, all of these larger concepts of religion can actually be supported by this modality.
I've seen it in my groups. So it leads us to imagination in self. So one of the themes through your work is imagination.
Yeah.
Why do you think imagination is so central to healing and self-leadership?
I have so much opinion around that. But I want to go back for just a moment, though, and talk
Sure.
about what I hear you talking about, which is I believe that the healing that we need to do in this world is so directly connected to what you're talking about. We are born into a culture that has not done its work around the burdens that we've caused societally. And I believe that collective unburdenings and the work of Thomas Hubel and Dick Schwartz is so important. And I believe that churches can play a really big role in that. And I see the ISI really being at the front runner of that, of helping to support clergy, of course, trained in the map of IFS in the framework of spiritual formation to be able to help lead and do some of that work in their communities so that it's done at the community level. And that work is just so important. You know, Oklahoma is the crossroads of basically cultural burdens in the United States, right? So we not only do we have the 1921 race massacre, but we also have, of course, the land run. And so we have a lot of situations directly connected to unhealed systemic cultural burdens that need people to pay attention to them and need people to lend their systems to that kind of healing, whether or not we know our ancestral connections or not. So that's one bookmark I just want to put a pin in.
Yeah.
And then I want to say to your question about imagination, which is so beautiful, is that for me, imagination is not fantasy. Imagination is a human capacity that allows us to perceive possibilities that do not yet exist. And every act of healing begins in some ways with imagination. So before we can live differently, we have to be able to imagine that something different can even be possible. And in my world, as I understand imagination, we are outsourcing our imagination to other people instead of actually cultivating our own imagination. And I believe that IFS really helps to support us to tap into not only our imagination, using our brain in a very different way to connect with the energy that's inside of us, but I believe that it helps us to envision possibilities that would otherwise not exist. So if it's lost, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
I think if it's lost, I think IFS is very helpful, but I think we've got to just get curious. We've got to spend time with beauty. We've got to read poetry. We've got to pay attention to children. We've got to slow down enough to notice what captures our attention without demanding our productivity. And that imagination and productivity connection to me is just, it's a soul sucker, man. Like it really causes a lot of harm in this world. And I think that the more that we can reconnect to our own imagination, the more we can change the future of not only political landscapes, but also just our own lives.
We covered so much ground. It's almost 30 minutes here so far.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, there's a couple of things here I have at the end of my ideas here. There's the
Yeah.
lightning round. I'm just curious if
Yeah.
you'd like to participate in the lightning round.
Sure.
So a book every IFS enthusiast should read besides No Bad Parts.
Okay, you can't just ask me one, so I'm going to have to give you
Yeah, you can
three.
give me your top
Okay,
5 or whatever.
so number one, and I think that if Seth Copold listens to this, he owes me something because I offer this book to every single human being. But Seth Copold's Self-Led is my book that I give to every person I guide through IFS because I think it's so concise at explaining not only IFS, but in a variety of different ways we're in relationship, from relationship to ourselves, relationship to our families, relationship to work, relationship to spirituality. I would also say that just because IFS doesn't directly connect with cultural competence, it's important to read Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands, which is just a fantastic book to help people understand more about what it means to be culturally competent in the United States and in North America in particular. And then one that's just really recent that I love that actually had a foreword by a colleague of mine from California Institute of Integral Studies, Diana Quinn, is The Flowering War by Dr. Oscar Perez. Also just intense, beautiful. But all three of these are looking at identity, historical burdens, cultural burdens, and I believe parts in a lot of ways.
Okay. Well, there's a
Yeah.
couple there. That sounds great. One misconception about IFS, you'd love to retire.
Not all suffering is trauma. I think that it doesn't say that explicitly, but I think we get this idea that if there's suffering, there's a burden that we can unburden. And not all suffering is trauma. So I'm really working and pushing the boundaries of suffering also as an existential experience and not just about trauma. And then the other one I would say is that self is, a lot of times I think people think that self is a destination or a point that we can arrive at. And it's not. It's either a wave of energy, or my new kind of understanding of self-energy that I like to say is self is a location where the material of our humanness meets the eternal. So it's where the spiritual and the material meet. And I would even argue in a Christian context, that would be the Holy of Holies.
I was going to say that would preach. That would preach.
Yeah, it will preach all day long. Yeah, we'll preach all day long.
That's good. What brings your system joy right now?
Oh my gosh, my standard poodle, my daughter, my wife, my friends, my work, my health. I'm a cancer survivor. I count every day as a blessing. And I have this kind of Alexander Hamilton from the musical energy of just writing and writing and writing and writing and writing.
I was just going to ask you, what's one practice you return to every day? So
it's right. Some of it's writing, but it's more about a posture of paying attention and really a posture of looking for serendipity. I think I'm a 70s baby, and I think it stems from Mr. Rogers looking me square in the eye and telling me to look for the helpers.
Yeah, that's great.
So, yeah.
Okay, last one. Complete the sentence. Healing becomes possible when?
Healing becomes possible when we can bring compassionate attention to what is true without abandoning ourselves or one another.
Thank you for today. CelesteLebak.com for all things. I think the slogan or the tagline is
Making the unseen seen. Yeah, but the Inner Sanctuary Institute is also connected to CelesteLebak.com right now until we have the funds to be able to have our own website, which will happen soon.
Yes, that's great. Yeah. Such a joy to connect with you today. And all my friends in all the different spheres that I'm connected to, please watch this and send it to others, because this is an opportunity that's coming up in the next little while in the fall. That is, I'm not going to say it's a one time, but it's probably, I'm a person that likes to do things the first time. A bit of an
early
outlier.
adopter.
Yeah, early adopter. There's a part of me that wants to think we're visionaries, but I just like, no, we're really just
we are visionaries.
Well, and that too. Visionaries plus early adopter. Okay.
Yes.
Peace. Thank you.
Thank you.